Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing our deep dive into this Auburn Tigers program, heading into spring practice, fall camp, the 2024 season. We took a look at the offensive line, the defensive line, the offensive skill positions. Now we're taking a look at the back end of this Auburn Tigers defense, a unit that they're replacing a lot of starting production, a lot of NFL talent. But when I was doing my deep dive into this roster, into this depth chart, going back, watching the bowl game against Maryland, where you got to see a lot of this young talent get on the field, I think there's a lot of players that you're excited about heading into 2024. And I think a position group that, DJ Durkin, Hugh Freeze, Charles Kelly are going to come in. See what these guys look like during spring practice. And if there's a position that Auburn might go address after the spring practice window, it might be in this defensive back room, because you look at it, a ton of young talent on this roster, not a lot of proven production, which, we're going to find out during spring practice if some of these young guys are ready to play or not. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. And these deep dives have truly just been a blast for me to do. The amount of feedback, the amount of support, the amount of comments. I'm learning a ton from you guys in the comment section. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support. One, if y'all do enjoy the content, you want to support the fellas, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section how you feel about this unit heading into 2024. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with talking about what we saw from this Auburn defense in 2023. And I thought it was a really underrated unit. You look at the numbers from this defense, they're not necessarily jumping off of the page, but the more film I go back and watch from this Auburn defense, really solid unit. And I think the numbers don't look that great because they were playing opposite of an offense that really struggled to possess the football. A lot of 3-and-outs, putting this Auburn defense in a lot of bad spots. This Auburn defense, from a numbers standpoint, it's going to improve in 2024 just by the offense getting better, being able to hold on to the football, not putting the defense in as bad of spots. So I like this defense. I love bringing in a guy like Charles Kelly in the back end to work with some of these young guys in the back end. Now I want to take a look at what this unit looks like in 2024. And I want to start with the linebacker room. And this is a linebacker room, specifically a guy like Eugene Asante, that I'm probably just going to be banging the table for all offseason. I think there's not a more criminally underrated linebacker across the entire country than Eugene Asante. Really the heart and soul of this Auburn defense last year. When there were plays being made, it always seemed like Eugene Asante was around the football. 86 tackles, 6.5 tackles for a loss, 5 sacks. Does a phenomenal job getting downhill, playing behind the line of scrimmage. And the number that really stuck out to me, a 6.3% missed tackle rate for a guy that is tackling the ball carrier almost 90 times in 2023 to only miss 6% of your tackles at that linebacker position. Truly incredible. Guy that I thought could have gone to the NFL draft decides to come back. And when you have a linebacker like Eugene Asante, I think that's absolutely massive. Another thing that I think stands out to me after looking back at the numbers, you certainly saw this on the film, they like to be aggressive with those linebackers. They like to blitz them. Eugene Asante, 16 quarterback hurries, 5 sacks, a 13% pass rush win rate. And I would throw in Austin Keys as another guy that you love to see Auburn either blitz off the edge, blitz in the A-gap. Love how they use these linebackers. They're putting these linebackers in positions to really impact football games. Really excited about those two. And a guy that I would throw in there just as you keep your eyeballs on him, because I think he could play a lot for Auburn in 2024. That's true freshman DeMarcus Riddick, a guy that, again, you'll probably see him blitz the quarterback a lot. There's a little maybe confusion about what position he plays on the defensive side of the football, can rush off the edge, can be that off-ball linebacker. He got in early for bowl practices. You started hearing a lot of buzz pretty much immediately when he stepped on that Auburn practice field. Keep your eyes out on a guy like DeMarcus Riddick, not necessarily starting as a true freshman, but a guy that is going to be playing for the Auburn Tigers in 2024. Now, you look at the back end of this defense, and make no mistake about it, you are replacing a lot of talent, a lot of NFL talent. The guy I want to talk about first, Keionte Scott, getting him back. I know he hit the transfer portal for about 36 hours, comes back to Auburn. Massive. I think he was one of Auburn's best defensive backs in 2023, a guy that can play the nickel. Sounds like they're going to move him to the boundary in 2024. And I think that's the big question is, can Keionte Scott go to the boundary of this cornerback room and be that true cornerback one for the Auburn Tigers. I certainly think he can. He's a good tackler. He's extremely sticky. 34 targets, only gave up 18 receptions. I'm a massive fan of Keionte Scott. I think it's massive to get a guy like a veteran presence like Keionte Scott in the back end. And again, that position versatility is going to allow Charles Kelly, DJ Durkin, and Hugh Freeze to really get the best defensive backs on the field at the same time. And whether that's Keionte Scott working at the nickel, whether that's Keionte Scott working at the boundary, I think that is a very, very key piece to this defensive back puzzle in 2024. The next guy I want to talk about, Kayin Lee, as a true freshman. I mean, he might just be you talk about a true freshman coming in playing as good as Lee did during that 2023 year. Faced 26 targets, only 13 receptions, a 50% completion percentage when targeted for a true freshman in the SEC. A lot of people like to talk about Keldrick Falk, who was awesome for Auburn on that defensive line, including me. I'm sleeping on a guy like Kayin Lee. I turn on the film for Auburn, have to check that number, go back to the depth chart. He is going to be a very good player for the Auburn Tigers. And I went into this practice, into this deep dive, saying a little bit concerned about Auburn in the back end with all the talent and the veteran experience that they lost. A guy like Kayin Lee makes me feel much better about what Auburn has coming back in 2024. The last guy I want to mention at that cornerback position, Antonio Kite, a guy that I think it's easy to write off because he didn't play a ton at Alabama, was a very sought-after recruit coming out of high school. You dig into the Alabama roster. I mean, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, for the NFL draft fans, are two guys that are probably going to go in the top 20 of the NFL draft. It starts making sense that Antonio Kite did not play a ton for Alabama in 2023, a guy that I think comes into Auburn, not only adds a ton of needed depth to this cornerback room, but a guy that certainly could be competing for a starting spot. And I don't think it's crazy to say Antonio Kite and Lee on the boundary, maybe Lee at the nickel, and then Keionte Scott at the nickel. I mean, you have some guys that you feel really good about, three cornerbacks that you're kind of looking at competing for those two spots at the wide cornerback spot. You look at the star position, more that nickel. You have Champ Anthony, Sylvester Smith. There is probably a little bit more depth than I gave Auburn credit for coming into this deep dive at that cornerback position, that you're feeling pretty good about what this Auburn secondary can look like in 2024, especially with a guy like Charles Kelly getting injected into that room. And you take a look at the safety spot, I think the biggest name, and this is more the position that I think Auburn might address after the spring practice window. You go and get a guy like Jaron Thompson, who I think is Jaron Thompson the best player that Auburn landed in the transfer portal? Probably not. He might be the most impactful, though, because he's a guy that has started a ton of football for the Texas Longhorns, has played a ton of football at the collegiate level. You needed experience in that safety room. Jaron Thompson is going to give you a really high floor. You know what you're getting with Jaron Thompson. He can do a lot of different things. You can walk him into the box. He can play that slot corner. He can play the deep safety role. He's a guy that is versatile, has played a lot of football, been around the block, and you're talking about a very young safety room for the Auburn Tigers. Jaron Thompson was a massive get. Again, a guy that 176 tackles, 5 interceptions, 18 passes defended during his career at Texas. Played a lot of football, much needed depth and experience for the Auburn Tigers in that back end. A couple other guys, Caleb Wooden, Laquan Robinson is probably another guy coming from the JUCO ranks that I think a lot of Auburn Tiger fans are very excited about. I think it was a long time coming, him winding up at Auburn. That's probably the safeties that you're taking a look at for Auburn as potential starters in 2024. And I think it comes down to you're going to see Hugh Freeze, Charles Kelly, DJ Durkin get all this young talent on the spring practice field. We're going to be able to watch the spring game, break it down after we see it, and kind of get a feel for, all right, like what do we have in this room? Do we need to go out and add more talent? I think, one, them not getting that aggressive with the safeties. I think they might have gotten aggressive, didn't land a ton of them. Jaron Thompson obviously being a big one. I think you're going to see Auburn kind of evaluate during that spring practice window, say, hey, do we need to go add another body or two to this defensive backfield? And if they think they do, you'll probably see them do it after spring practice. But I think there's a very good chance that you take a look at the names that we just talked about, and they're saying, all right, we feel pretty good about the young talent, the progression that they've made. They get another fall camp to work in. We feel good about what we have in the back end. That's what I'm looking for the most for this Auburn team heading into spring practice, this defensive back room, a lot of young talent, a lot of talent that we're excited about, but not necessarily proven. So we'll see what they look like during spring practice and then see if they go, I guess, address it, you might say, in the transfer portal. Those are my takes on this Auburn secondary room. Again, not a ton of film to go back to 2023 and talk about because a lot of those guys that were playing a lot, not with this program anymore. We'll continue to talk about this position group. I think a position group that you're excited about, but you also have some questions about. We'll continue to talk about it. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.